TSM possibly leaving the LCS, Cloud9 looking unstoppable, Golden Guardians resurging, EG just straight up failing, and FlyQuest maybe some of the same. Episode 120 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT 250 starts now. Guys, we will get to the TSM stuff. JNT and I have a lot to say on it. We're going to start with the playoff series that just happened this weekend. Not exactly the closest series, eh, JNT?
Yeah, it was kind of a one-sided stomp. Cloud9 FlyQuest. Although I did predict the Cloud9 3-0, I didn't think it would sort of happen in this fashion where it felt like FlyQuest wasn't even in it to begin with. I know game 2 was probably the closest game, but I mean games 1 and game 3 were completely one-sided.
Yeah, it was an absolute stomp. And the thing is, we talked about how for a couple of weeks we talked about how it would be nice to see FlyQuest show up and show that they could play through different lanes that's not Prince carrying the game. And then last week Vikla actually looked pretty good and he had a good Vagar performance and we were pretty excited saying, "Hey, you know what? Maybe FlyQuest does have more than one weapon." And then Vikla seemed to have probably the worst performance that he may have had all split long. The whole series was pretty much a nightmare, but especially the Tristana game, it was really reminiscent of the tactical Malphite meme, honestly, where he's just jumping in on top of I don't even remember, was it Sejuani? It was like a melee
There was a couple fights
champion.
in that game. There was like a fight topside where he jumped on Sejuani's head. There was a fight around Rift Herald where he tried to jump onto Berserker, where like he just jumped into 4 people. There was another fight around Baron where he tried to jump on Berserker into like 5 people. So definitely was doing some Malphite cosplay there.
He was lost. And like the crazy thing is we were giving him so much credit just the week before for how good he was looking. And when you really think about it, it kind of does sum up the split for him specifically. A lot of people had him on the All Pro because he had some pop off performances, and a lot of people kept him off of the All Pro ballots because he would have his run it down games. And so it was kind of fitting in a way the what happened last week versus what happened this weekend. The change, I guess.
Yeah, definitely wasn't the greatest performance out of Vikla. I think that he was probably going to be a very important person on FlyQuest in this series, especially when it came to the dominance that we've seen out of MNS. And, was he going to sort of be able to compete with MNS in the early lane phase, which has been one of the strongest portions of MNS's gameplay so far that we've seen in the LCS, because he likes to play very aggressive in lane. And it was kind of a question of, can Vikla stop that, or can he mitigate that potentially with stuff like a Vigar pick, which he was whipping out, a ton in the series versus 100 Thieves. But unfortunately, Vikla got his face caved in.
Yeah, and we highlight Vikla just because of how bad it was, and but like let's be clear, it was not all Vikla this series. FlyQuest got gapped just about everywhere. We mentioned how Impact has traditionally been the what was the word we used,
The
Jinter?
neutralizer.
The
But
neutralizer,
and then he gets solo
and
killed like what, 8 minutes in? So
he didn't neutralize anything in that series. Fudge, I remember saying Fudge is going to be the toughest test to like neutralize or whatever, and like Fudge just stomped him. He solo killed him the one time. He pretty much solo killed him another time, even though it wasn't an official solo kill. There was an assist, but like it was still pretty much a solo kill. Fudge just stomped him. That was an absolute gap. Bot lane, I think, is where C9 is looking the best. And while I absolutely want to praise Berserker and Sven for looking fantastic, I can't ignore that Prince didn't look like himself, and Ayla looked as bad as we've seen him so far this split as well. So it was like quite the difference from one side to the other as far as the bot lane performance, also.
yeah, I think when we talk about like bad performances from a player who's on a good team, you kind of see it from, I guess we saw it with Vikla a little bit. We saw it with Jojo Pune on EG. Um, but when you look at when you go look at these players holistically, like Jojo Pune, yes, we know that he struggles with dying in the side lane and not necessarily knowing how aggressive he can play in the lane phase, which results in a lot of deaths for him. But he has other very clear strengths, and is probably a reason why Jojo will continue to play within the LCS and will continue to start with EG, because we know what his ceiling is. And I feel like when it comes to Ayla, we've been seeing all of the mistakes with nothing good to to try to convince ourselves that there is upside with this player. And I think it kind of begs the question, where does Winsome fit into the picture of this whole thing? Because you had Winsome playing in the support role for the first 9 games of the split, where FlyQuest went 8-1, only losing that one game to TSM right at the end of the first round robin. However, he gets subbed out when Ayla is able and ready to play. So while I think everybody recognized that maybe it would take some time for Ayla to acclimate to the LCS and maybe he wasn't going to be popping off right from the get go, I don't think that people expected him to be the main liability on this team.
Yeah, and I mean, this weekend he wasn't the main one. He was just one of them, right? They had liabilities all over the roster. And I think this does go back to what we talked about just a couple of weeks ago, where it was like maybe he's being scapegoated, but maybe he is part of the problem. And if you do have another support, I am switching now. I am definitely saying yes, make a switch, because FlyQuest didn't look at all like anything that like they were going to be able to compete. So I still concede that FlyQuest, the org, and the coaches, all that, have way more information than we do. I'm just going based off the information that we're seeing, which was, in all fairness, only 9 games out of Winsome, and then I don't even know how many games since Ayla came back. It's very clear that you got to make a swap here because Ayla's not making it work. He's going for plays where like FlyQuest has no world where they're ever able to follow up. His recon engages are atrocious. They're really, really bad. Prince is like farming mid lane. The team is engaging. Like they are not on the same page whatsoever. Everyone's going to speculate. Is there language barriers there? Maybe, maybe not. All I know is something's got to change. I don't see how you run back the same roster, um, and expect a different result. Because I mean, they've lost to Cloud9 how many, like 5 times now in the last what 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I guess in the last 3 weeks, yeah, they've lost to them. I'm trying to think. The overall head-to-head record of FlyQuest C9 this year is 6-1. I'm pretty sure because the two regular season matches, the
I think
tiebreaker.
it's 5-1.
Yes, that would be the
Yeah.
correct math. I'm dumb.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something, but I forgot what it was.
Okay, well the I'll keep going then, because the other thing I wanted to ask you was, even if Winsome is in, does that change the outcome of the series? Because I think the answer is no. Like I still think they get 3-0 just based off of how gapped they got in all the other lanes. So it's like, yes, this is fixing one problem, but it's not fixing the whole team here, and I think it's important to be clear on that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to this series specifically, if you were to have inserted Winsome, I don't think there is, a change. They probably still get 3-0 stomped. However, if Winsome were to come in, for this upcoming finals weekend, I definitely think that FlyQuest could probably change up their game plan a little bit. And obviously, this is somewhat meta reliant because when Winsome was playing, it was that kind of aggressive bot lane style in the early games where we saw people drafting a lot for early bot lane priority. Winsome was playing a ton of Nautilus, which was pretty much the only engaged support that was viable at the time. Obviously, is now more viable with less of the 80 carry slash Heimerdinger support meta that we did see. So I think that Winsome could be, a potential swap for Ayla. Obviously, you mentioned we don't really have all the details when it comes to what the coaching staff and the org are thinking. Who knows? Maybe Winsome has already been scrimming with the team for, he's been, flip flopping him and Ayla through scrims ever since he got subbed out. We don't know. But if he hasn't been scrimming, hopefully FlyQuest made the decision in this upcoming week to start practicing with him because Ayla has been a pretty clear liability, and I think you could get a potential difference in the bot lane having Winsome in there. Seemed to play a little bit more for lane, and Prince did obviously generate a lot of bot lane leads by himself. I say by himself, but it's him and the support, and we really haven't gotten any of that with Ayla. They've been actually pretty passive in comparison to the first half of the round robin where they were very aggressive.
Yeah, I like that you highlight the idea that maybe Winsome is already scrimming and maybe Winsome's running it down in their scrims as well. So like that's why I say earlier, like FlyQuest has in more information than we do. We're just basing it off of the information that we do have. You would make a swap. But if they put Ayla back in there this weekend, I wouldn't necessarily blame them because again, they have more info than we do. Now
It,
to
it
talk
could just be a situation where if Winsome hasn't even been in the picture, like there's no point in trying to insert him back into the team when he has had no practice with it for X number of months. So it
Yep,
all it
that's
all
very
really depends on what's going on behind the scenes, and we'll probably find out right before the start of the Golden Guardian series if Winsome is playing or not.
yeah. From the other side of the coin, to talk more about C9, they're looking pretty damn good, man. The only thing is, it's like it's hard to judge. Like, okay, is C9 looking really, really good, or are they just smacking everyone because they're all looking really, really bad? And I think I don't even think it's possible to really tell because I don't think C9 like how can you judge C9, for example, when like Vikla's just throwing the fight by just jumping in on Tristana and instantly losing the fight? Like, can I really be like, oh wow, C9 looked so good in that fight that time that Vikla's inting or the time that Ayla's inting? You know what I mean? It's so hard to judge if C9 is like a North America 10 out of 10 or if they're just an 8 out of 10 and the rest of the teams are like 5 or 6 or something.
Yeah. One thing, though, I guess for the side of C9 is actually really good and they're improving and whatnot, and they're not just succeeding because the rest of the teams in North America are bad, is I thought there was a really drastic difference in the way that they team fought compared to this series versus the CLG series. Obviously, the games aren't fresh in everybody's mind, so I might lose a few people here. But if you go back and watch that Cloud9 versus CLG series, a lot of it was CLG crowding around the major objective when objective setups were going on, and it was Cloud9 who was boxing them in and sort of trying to flank from multiple angles. But CLG did a really good job of pulling the trigger with their primary engages, which most often than not was Dokla playing the Scion and just picking one side of the fight to fight on and just absolutely sending it on that one side. And CLG had a lot of success doing that against Cloud9. And looking at this series, Cloud9 was playing the CLG part in that sort of skirmish, where FlyQuest was normally trying to set up objectives early and often because they were usually behind and they had to figure that, hey, if we don't get control now, how are we ever going to get control? And Cloud9 basically just decided to pick and choose, like, hey, we want to press go, let's go. So they just did a really good job of picking a side of the fight to fight on and just committing to it, because I think we're seeing, how do I say this? Since we've kind of flip flopped in the meta back to like super front to back heavy, we're seeing a lot more tank top. We're seeing a lot of engage peel supports, and it can sometimes be a bit difficult to fight a fight on multiple fronts. And sometimes you just have to send it on one direction. And I feel like Cloud9 did a really good job of fixing a lot of those mistakes they had in that CLG series, and they really showed in this one.
Yeah, if you're getting flanked, you have to pick a direction and fight your way out of the flank before you let the other team flank you. And I agree that that is something that looked a little bit different. And if I want to talk about specific performances, I mean, you could point to pretty much every C9 player, but specifically the bot lane is what's looking really, really good to me. Obviously, Berserker's Aphelios game was 1v9. His Varus game was his poke Varus is insane. He lands everything. But I actually think the most impressive performance to me of the weekend for C9 was actually Sven on the Heimer. He was landing everything. I was really, really impressed, and I think we're so quick to praise Berserker because he is really good and because we know he's supposed to be really good. And I think people are kind of forgetting that like Sven is not supposed to be the support main. He's a long time AD carry, but I think it's time to start looking at Sven as a support because he is looking amazing in the support role. And so I think C9 has this bot duo that maybe they're best in slot in both of those roles. Obviously, a lot of people will still point to Prince and Vulcan, for example, but I don't know, man. C9's bot lane looking good.
I mean, it was definitely a clear indication that Cloud9 was going to exclusively play with the spot lane, because Ben straight up said that the only AD carry that I'm going to play support for is Berserker. So, I mean, that all points to them having a really, strong bond. And obviously, Berserker knew what he was getting himself into when Sven initially role swapped from ADC to support. So it's obviously something that Cloud9 is super committed to, and it feels like they're sort of reaping the rewards of that right now, because it
Yeah.
is clear that Sven is one of, if not the best support in the league at the current moment.
You know what I'll say? The last thing I'll say on this, and then maybe we can move on, is last year it was, oh, Sven's only looking okay because it's like just he's only playing Lulu and he's only playing enchanters, right? And then at the start of this year was, oh, it's 80 carries that are being played support. So it's like no wonder he's looking good because he's playing like I don't know whether it was Callista support, I don't even remember anymore. And it's like at what point do we just say, hey, Sven could play freaking anything and perform on it, and maybe he's just a good support, you know?
Yeah, no,
Anyway.
it's all
So
true, all facts.
yeah, absolutely insane. Really impressed, and they're looking like heavy favorites going into the finals weekend. There was another series that happened this weekend. Before we get to it, I just want to remind people to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Hit the like button; it helps us a lot, and leave a comment. Also, reminder that the games are going to be Saturday, Sunday this weekend for the LCS finals and semifinals, but they are at 4 p.m. EST, guys. What is that?
1.
1 o'clock West Coast.
Yep.
So they're changing the times probably because Europe, I'm guessing. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so we're gonna be live probably after finals is what we're aiming for right now. So still planning on going live Sunday night at twitch.tv/Clown Fiesta Podcast. You can find us there and join us live after finals. I will tweet out when we're going live, so you can follow there if you're really curious. Now let's talk about EG and Golden Guardians. This series was a smackdown, and it went in the way that no one was expecting it to go.
Yeah, I can't remember what we predicted for the series beforehand. I want to say I said 3-0, and
3-0 for sure, right?
yeah, I just can't remember if one of us, if you said 3-1, but I'm pretty sure that I said 3-0. But as you said, definitely the 3-0 none of us were expecting.
Dude, I don't know whether to be happy or mad about this series because, like, the whole split long, everyone, including ourselves, very critical of Licorice. I thought Licorice looked great. So, like, I was really happy. It was like, hey, you know what? This is so good to see a player that struggled so much look fantastic. So that was great. But then when I look at EG, I'm like, I expect more out of you, man. Like, that was it was trash. And dude, we drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
Like, we were like, "Hey, maybe EG's back," you know? Oh,
well, we're definitely eating our words on our coping with regards to EG, but as you mentioned, I think Licorice being the player who stepped up for Golden Guardians in both the 100 Thieves and the EG series is definitely something none of us were expecting. And I think the main thing in this series that was more surprising, I guess that was the most surprising, was that Licorice did it on 3 different carries. You know, when
yes.
Golden Guardians has been succeeding in the LCS this year, it's primarily been with Licorice playing Renekton or some form of tank utility and letting the other members of Golden Guardians do the heavy lifting, where this time around it was the complete opposite. And Licorice previously had actually been really struggling to find his place on carries. More often than not, was just ending up completely useless on a lot of these carries, or any lane advantage that he would get would potentially get thrown away later in the game due to some positional errors or just overstepping a little bit. But for Licorice to pop off on 3 different carries on a player like Someday, really impressive.
Yeah, like, I don't even necessarily know if I blame EG for not respecting the pick ban against Golden Guardians in the top lane because, like, they just blind picked Malphite and was like, "What is Licorice gonna do?" And honestly, I can't really blame them for thinking that. And Licorice said, "I'm gonna pick Rumble and I'm gonna smack you." And honestly, that's what he did. He almost erased Jojo Pion the one time. He almost 100-0 the Lissandra, forced Someday down to TP to save him, and then helped the team just grab Baron on the other side. Like, he put out so much pressure. Same thing with Fiora. How many times have we seen them put him on Fiora? He gets like a kill from a gank and then has no pressure the rest of the game. No, this Fiora was absolutely pulling multiple players down to his lane and then flanking like a god. He had multiple flanks in that game where I was like, holy shit, where has this Licorice been? So yeah, I was really, really happy for Licorice. Um, I guess I could go on all day, but I'll leave it at that. Really, really impressed, and he definitely changed my mind as far as what it means to put him on a carry.
Mhm. And I know Licorice was getting a lot of the public praise for his performance in the EG series, but I think the other player that we really got to talk about, and one whom you thought should have gotten player of the series, was Huhi. And
Oh, for
that
sure.
Rel game 2 was actually 1v9. That was like a core JJ level of performance. Because when we
I don't
think of
know
like
how.
old core JJ, like we talk about, he's probably the only support in the league that could actually 1v9 games playing like tank utility support champions. Huhi did it that game.
Yeah, I don't know how many times he had just game or team winning fights just with his engage. Like, the team fight would start, and because it's him engaging on like 3 or 4 people, the team fight was already won as soon as he engaged. Unbelievable. Now, I don't even know who got player of the series. Maybe it was Licorice, maybe it was Huhi. I don't know. But like
I thought it
that
was
Rel game,
Licorice, but
I don't really care who it was. I think both of them played great. Um, I do think it should have been Huhi, but regardless, they both had great series. I think that Rel game was probably the biggest carry performance of the weekend, and I think that, like, including the C9 series where Sven was on Heimer, and including when Berserker was on Aphelios, and those were big carry performances. I just think that Huhi Rel game was that good
I was trying to look up to see who actually won player of the game. I
of
can't
the
find it
series.
anywhere. Or yeah, player of the series.
Yeah,
I can't find it. I thought it was Licorice though, but
it
I
could have been.
mean,
I know Licorice got it the week before.
Yeah.
but um maybe it's time we start talking about EG side of things, the failure, if you will, and how they failed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious answer is Jojo Pune underperforming, but
100%.
at the same time, you know, the fact that they got destroyed in all lanes pretty much. I mean, it obviously is much bigger than only Jojo Pune, while he might be one of the major issues, but we're not seeing the same impact from Someday. We're kind of seeing him relegated to just tank duty. A pretty stark difference from last year on 100 Thieves and even the beginning of the split on EG, where he actually was playing a lot of carries. I don't really know if that dynamic is playing a lot into it in terms of how they're able to play the map. Usually, EG is normal, having a lot of top pressure in the game, and pretty much since the second half of the round robin, or I guess even later than that, ever since like week 7, Someday is just kind of a potato.
He's not what we were expecting, right? And as far as the performance strictly based off of last year, I thought Someday was a better player than Impact. And so I know a lot of people didn't agree with that, but for me, it was very clear that last year specifically, Someday had the better year. And so based off that, it should be an upgrade, and it just wasn't. Like Impact just was better, and it's not really close. Impact had a much better split. Even if Someday wasn't an absolute liability, we didn't get the version of Someday that we saw last year. Maybe that's acclimating to a new team. I don't know, but we didn't see the pressure out of him that we got used to. And I guess maybe for this series specifically, you could give a little bit of a pass because he kept getting counterpicked. But if you look at the season altogether, I think you can still see that Someday wasn't what we were expecting out of him.
Yeah, and like I said before, maybe that has to do with the meta and it's shifting more towards a tank top. But at the same time, we've seen teams within the LCS be able to play to the strength of their top side, despite it maybe not being the best overall draft strategy. But I think EG, it kind of just ended up being too late. Like it felt like they made no changes, and it was just the same EG that we got from week 7 onwards. It just
Yeah.
nothing was going right.
What we saw last week and where we started to get excited for EG did not show up this week whatsoever. They looked way different. And I have a take here, J&T. I think this is going to be a little bit controversial. You can let me know how hot of a take this is. I think Jojo Pyun should have to fight for his spot in the summer split. I think there should be, I don't know if you want to call it tryouts or whatever it is. I think there should be him having to regain his spot. Is that a hot take, cold take? What is that?
Well, I guess
I
I
can
don't
explain further if you need me to, by the way.
Well, I mean, whenever you want to bring up the possibility of benching a player or potentially acquiring a new player, you obviously have to look at what the options are. So,
Right.
option number one would obviously be Ryoma, who is the EG. I don't know if it's challengers or prodigies. I don't know the exact name for it, but he's the guy who's under Jojo Pune on Evil Geniuses, and we did see him for one game when I think it was that first COVID weekend that they had where they were playing from home, and JoJo didn't play on the Friday game, if I remember correctly. So that would be option number one. Option number two, obviously, would be to bring in a different mid laner, which I guess at that point, I don't know who it would be. So I guess in your world right here, are you thinking it's strictly between JoJo and Ryoma, or is there another person who could come into the equation?
If they have someone in mind, sure, but yes, I am strictly talking about JoJo versus Ryoma. Now, let me be clear that this is not a JoJo hate take. This is a holding players accountable take. I think to play in the LCS, you need to one, work really hard, which I can't tell you how hard JoJo Pyun's working. I don't know. But two, you have to perform. And he clearly is not performing. He died more than anybody else this split. He was one of the worst players in the LCS this split. And I know everyone will say he's such a good laner and he gets a bunch of lane advantages. And I would just say that his CSD at 15, the split was 6+6, which is good, but it doesn't mean anything when you die more than anybody else. And so when I say that you need to hold players accountable, you need to prove that you can perform to keep your spot. That doesn't mean you give up on Jojo Pyun. That doesn't mean that at all. It just means that, hey, you have to earn your spot just like every other player in the LCS does. And the team that I want to point to for the reasoning behind this is Cloud9. Do you remember when Cloud9 benched Sneaky and Jensen and everyone was really pissed off?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is no different. I think Cloud9 set the precedent that no one has their spot secured ever, and you continuously have to work hard and perform to keep your spot. And that's what I think it is. Ultimately, if they do this, I think Jojo Pin will get his spot back. and that's what I think everyone, including myself, is cheering for. Like, I don't want to see the LCS without Jojo Pyun. I just think that it sets the precedent that you need to work hard and perform, and you'll get your spot. And I'll remind people that after C9 set that precedent, they've been freaking good, man. They're the only team in this league that is consistently good every year, like every year. When was the last time Cloud9 finished bottom five?
Season 5 summer.
Right? Like they're legit the only team that is continuously good.
Yeah.
And I think that's because they set the precedent that no one's spot is ever safe. You're
They
always fighting for it. Even Diplex got benched this split because he wasn't performing. They put in MNS. And so like, I think competition breeds excellence. I know I'm not the only first person to say that. I think that's why there should be tryouts, honestly. And I think if they do that, I think you see a fire lit under JoJo's ass. And I think he absolutely tears apart the so-called tryouts. And I think he comes out on fire and we get JoJo back. That's what I think would happen.
No, I think it's a good idea, and even to throw it back further than your Cloud9 reference, if we want to go really OG, like remember TSM Keith McBrief, like they thought about benching both Wild Turtle and Dyrus. I think this was in like this is season 4, I think. Might have been season 4, if my memory serves me right. But that was when TSM Keith subbed in for Wild Turtle, and they also were thinking about benching Dyrus. This was before. No, this was definitely season 5, not season 4, by the way. But they ended up benching Turtle, brought him back in. TSM went to Worlds as number 1 seed that year after Cloud9, I think, was leading the league for the majority of that season. So I'm kind of just trying to reiterate your point that we've seen a ton of examples in the past where top teams will bench one of their star players if they feel that the team can improve or they feel the player needs extra motivation. So I think I agree with you. Like whether it is just Ryoma or they potentially bring in somebody else, you know, it's a good idea, I think.
Interesting. I wasn't sure if you were going to agree with that or not. I would love to know what people think. If
Well,
you're
I'm,
watching on YouTube, leave a comment, please. I want to know if people agree or disagree
but I mean, here's the
because
thing:
I thought it would be a really unpopular opinion, and maybe it is. I don't know.
how many int games did Jojo Pune have? Like
Like
he
half of the games this year. I don't know.
maybe more. Like I think obviously with Jojo Pune in the past, we've seen him have kind of some one-off games where Jojo Pune will just straight up run it down, but primarily his good is outweighing the bad, and usually by a pretty large margin. And one of the reasons why Jojo has been one of the top mids in LCS ever since he came in. However, this split specifically, it felt like it was every other game that Jojo Pune was running it down, and you just simply cannot have that on a top team in the LCS.
Yeah. Like I said, very curious to know what people think about it, though. So please leave a comment on if you think I'm right or wrong, and I'll be reading the comments. So we'll see if there's anybody that has a take on that. Should we do the obituary now that EG is dead? We say a little prayer.
Yeah, unfortunately, EG is dead.
Rest in peace, EG. I don't know how to pray. I'm noob prayer, but I will
Like I
say
said,
rest in peace, and we will see you back in summer.
like
Amen.
like I did last time, I'll hit him with one of these, the forehead. You touch your shoulders.
Yeah.
I'll give him one of those. But as everybody knows, when a team dies in the LCS, we give them a score of 1 to 10 based on how we thought their season went relative to their expectations. Now, if we want to talk about expectations, I think both of us and the majority of the community had EG pegged as the number 1 team coming into the league. And
Yep.
while that might not have been, rankings at the end of the season, it was the beginning of the season, to see where they were to where they finished, I'm I'm on like a 3 right here. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
I'm
even a
giving him a
2,
three
like,
also. I'm giving him a three.
and especially as the discussion we just had, we are questioning whether or not we need to take a hard look at JoJo and potentially replace him with somebody else. Like the fact that we are even saying that, I don't think anybody would have thought that at the beginning of the split.
Yeah, like to me, you mentioned that we think they were the favorite, sure, but I think not making it to MSI is the main failure, right? There's always another team that could absolutely pop off and take that spot, but we're sending two teams this year to MSI. One of them should definitely be EG, not only just coming into the split, but even coming into playoffs. Like with FlyQuest looking this bad, the spot should be yours as EG. Like that, the spot is open for the taking, and they just choked. They choked at the end of the split. They choked in playoffs, and they're dead. And so finishing what I guess they finished fourth,
Yeah,
not
4th.
not good enough. Not good enough at all. You mentioned JoJo. We're not even sure what to think about JoJo Pion anymore. Not only was he one of your better players, he was like maybe a franchise player, as like this new young player, North American talent. You could probably build up a bunch of content around him. Like and that's the guy that you're worried about the most is not good news for EG. So I think they're very, very unhappy with how the split went, and I would give them a 3 out of 10, even if they still made playoffs and whatever. Even if they went 3-0 last weekend, no, they're not happy at all.
Yeah, I mean, if it was Someday, for example, who was the player who was really struggling, I feel like it'd be easier from the minds of EG and how to fix that. One, considering he's a new player, potentially expendable, could be replaced, but Jojo Pune he is your franchise player at this point. So for him to be the guy that's struggling, it puts EG in a bad spot.
Yeah, I agree. I
And
agree.
although they finished fourth, you could argue maybe they're the fifth best team because they lost 100 Thieves 2 times before playoffs even started. So
I mean, I don't know what to think because I would say CLG, but they 3-0'd them. So like, I don't know,
yeah,
man. I don't know what to think anymore. But
little
anyways,
triangle right there with EG 100T and
yeah.
CLG.
Yeah, absolutely. But rest in peace, EG. It's not totally doomed for summer. Again, like I'm not giving up on JoJo yet. I think he should fight for a spot, and I think he will get back in there, and I think he'll show up. Maybe I'm an idiot for believing in him still, but I believe in him. I think he'll show up. Let's talk TSM JNT.
They're back,
My
baby.
God. Okay, so just real quick, the Sports Business Journal. There's the guy. His name is Kevin. What's his name? Kevin Hitt. I'll just read the first sentence. It
With two
says
T's.
TSM. Yeah, TSM will be pausing most of its esports efforts in several titles and maybe putting its League of Legends Championship Series franchise on the block. Now, this is big news, but it's maybe not as big of news as it should be. Like, how significant is this, JT? Because if this happened 5 or 6 years ago, this is an absolute nightmare. But I have to bring up the question: what does TSM bring to this league anymore that other teams don't?
Yeah, it's weird because I think we've had two separate instances in the past now where we hear the idea potentially floating around that TSM could exist outside of the LCS. However, those rumors, if we want to even call it that, haven't really amounted to anything. But when you look at this specifically with this Sports Business Journal article that came out, with Travis talking about it, with a lot of former pro players going on their co-stream saying they also have, some info about this feels way more real than the previous, rumors that we might have heard about TSM potentially exiting the LCS. This feels, like it actually has something behind it. So obviously
I want to
TSM. Oh, sorry, go ahead if you want to.
Well, I just want to reiterate. So last week we talked about them getting rid of a bunch of management, and I got to give you credit, JT. Pat yourself on the back here because you said like instantly this might be the end of LCS or TSM in the LCS. Now, I don't think anybody thought that it would happen a week after or in the middle of the year, right? There's still summer split that's yet to happen, but you did call it, so give yourself a pat on the back there. But I just got to get back to the significance of this. TSM doesn't really try to win anymore, right? Like, no offense to their current roster, but I don't think TSM put that roster together to win a championship. I think they put that roster together because they didn't have to pay them very much, right? So that's what I think. And speaking of not paying them very much, as per the Travis Gafford video, he seems to indicate that the rumor is TSM approached their players and said you have to take minimum salary or we're going to replace you. Or not verbatim, by the way. I'm lost on the exact words that he used, but it sounds like TSM is only willing to pay 75K, which is the league minimum, to all of their players next split, which I don't even know if they're allowed to do that. Like, I don't know what the contracts look like, but that sounds shady as hell, no?
Yeah, first of all, as you mentioned, it sounds super shady. Just the fact that some or a player could have their contract, their value changed in the middle of the year. Obviously, I mean, I feel like we've talked about this a million times now. The LCS needs to make their contracts public, and I feel like that should be a norm across, the entire league ecosystem because we do really have to do a lot of guesswork here when it comes to talking about player contracts. But presumably, when players sign contracts, they are for the whole year, not necessarily split to split. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is not the case. Maybe contracts are you're paid out on a split to split basis. However, the fact that TSM needs to approach their players and say, "Hey, you have 24 hours to accept the minimum," obviously indicates that, to back to our original point, TSM is definitely trying to separate themselves from the LCS. Travis even said within his video, one of the things that one of the things that he has heard is that TSM is trying to change their relationship with Riot Games in the LCS. And hearing that kind of language heavily indicates to them potentially exiting the LCS.
So I still think though, like I don't think there's a good excuse for them paying the players minimum, and I'll tell you why. Because Reggie recently put out a tweet that they're looking to get into CS:GO, which is not cheap. So how do you have money to get a CS:GO team, but you don't have money to pay your players the contract that they signed? If there's other information that I'm missing here, by all means, let me know. But that sounds like absolute garbage to not pay your players if you have the cash to go after a CS roster. No,
And I mean, kind of even the crazier part is the fact that they let go of 4 high-ranking, people on their management team, and yet they still also have to ask for their players to take a pay cut. So I feel like this whole thing comes back to the FTX deal that TSM signed, 2 years ago, where it was that 10-year, $210 million naming rights contract that was obviously like one of the biggest contracts in esports history. That there was a lot of attention brought to that, and obviously, as everybody in the world knows, with the collapse of FTX in like mid-November, it feels like a lot of this is timing up quite well with that news of FTX collapsing, because presumably TSM was going to have access to a shit ton of money within that contract to be able to operate their various esports teams, players, management, and whatnot. Now, not having that, I think we're kind of seeing the fat being snipped off, if you will.
yeah, and the thing is, they also still said that they're still profitable and blah 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 blah. But something's not adding up here. No way. There's no way you can tell me you lose the 210 million, and then you say we're gonna pay our players 75K or less. Oh, but we're also going after a CS roster, and the rumor is they might have been looking into a CB LOL team. Like this, no man, it's not adding up. There's going to be more information coming out about this, and we will definitely talk about it when it does, but this stuff is not adding up at all. Now, I also think let's talk about the future of TSM, because last year we had a video or a whole episode where we talked about TSM possibly going to the LEC. I just mentioned how it's possible that they were looking to join the CB LOL, but I have to ask, like, what are the chances that they get into those leagues? Like, let's say they're able to sell their LCS spot and they're able to maybe buy a CB LOL or LEC slot. Would the commissioners not block that sale from happening? Like, do they have the power to do that? And the reason I bring that up is because I don't expect the LEC commissioner to forget that, hey, by the way, Reggie is on probation for abusing players. And also, if things seem to go south in the LCS, they just tell their players, like, yeah, we're not going to pay you as much as your contract was anymore. Like, does TSM just expect the LEC to be like, oh, I'm sure it's fine, no problems there?
My best guess as to what could potentially happen if TSM existed outside of the LCS is that instead of them entering a league as themselves, it would most likely be, some sort of joint venture, or them buying or purchasing a different words, a different team slot in any league, whether that's CBLOL, LPL, LEC. So I think it's highly unlikely that TSM would enter a different league as TSM itself. If they were to enter as TSM, I would assume it'd be some sort of joint venture, potentially similar to the Koi Rogue thing that we saw over in the LEC over this past offseason, or acquiring and purchasing and basically buying out an entire different org and then taking that over from whichever league they could choose to join.
But
Because
but here's the sorry to cut you off, but here's the problem with that is like, who wants to team up with TSM right now? We heard a
I,
week ago or whatever that Reggie plans on being more hands-on. Who's gonna join an adventure with that guy? And like I said, aren't the LEC or CB Law commissioners gonna stop that sale? Don't they have the power to do that?
I'm just telling you what the options are, dog.
Please, anyone, please feel free to let me know if that's not possible. I just don't see a world where that happens. Now, Counter-Strike, not my area of expertise whatsoever. So maybe they can buy a Counter-Strike team and participate in whatever tournament as long as they qualify. I don't know. I just know from, like, for the LEC specifically, they're franchised, right? They
Yeah.
franchised a few years back.
Hmm.
I don't see a world where the LEC commissioner is like, oh yeah, this is fine. You know that team where the owner is on probation for abusing players? Not a problem. We'll look the other way. Oh, and you know how, like, if once things didn't start to go well, they just decided to stop paying their players. Yeah, that's not a problem. No problem here. Like, it just seems like an absolute disaster of a decision. So I don't know. I think TSM's putting the, what is it, the cart before the horse or whatever. I don't know.
Well, and I think we've kind of been discussing it from maybe more of like the business and operation side, but in terms of like, what they would look like from a fan base perspective in a different league. We kind of just we discussed this a little bit when we mentioned a year ago when they potentially were maybe going to join LEC. We were saying how yeah, they could be probably a pretty popular team in the LEC. Obviously, a lot of EU fans are NA fans, and NA fans are EU fans. Like they'll watch. What am I saying here? I'm saying that those leagues watch each other's leagues, so people know who TSM is
Yes.
in Europe. So that could potentially work. But when you talk about the CB law, like I don't even think that TSM would be the most popular team if they went to the CB law. Like
They'd be the punching bag, right? Everyone,
it,
LEC or CB LOL, I think everyone would cheer against them, right?
no, but I guess okay. I definitely agree with you. If they went to LEC, they'd be the punching bag. I don't think they'd be the punching bag in CB law. I just don't think they'd be relevant in the CB law because you have orgs like in Brazil. Like I'm trying to think of the top ones. There's like Loud. Loud is the biggest Brazilian org in the world basically, and they're like
Are
the
they? I don't
they're
know.
they're the shiny new toy because like Loud is like
Okay.
I think they're the top CBLOL team. They're the top Valorant team right now. So I wouldn't expect them to be more popular than Loud. I wouldn't expect them to be more popular than Pain. I probably wouldn't expect them to be popular than Kaboom. So by my guess, they're the fourth most popular team in the CB LOL. I just don't see a
At
world,
best.
and that's at
Probably still
best.
not, but at best, yeah.
And then who are you going to get? Like I said, I think one of the only options that TSM has available to them is they'd have to buy out another team because I don't think that they could just enter the space as their own entity and have any success whatsoever unless they'd be willing to fork out the cash to do so. But they weren't even willing to do that in the LCS. So why would they do that in the CB law?
It doesn't make any sense. What cash? They don't even
Yeah,
want to pay their players. I, I yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. And it's so funny because this is absolutely, in my opinion, the death of TSM. It is. I know they got the Blitz app and they can exist, but as far as like relevance, we mentioned last week they are no longer TSM anymore. It's not happening. I'll fully admit if I'm wrong. If TSM bounces back and somehow they're a big brand again, sure, I'm not counting on it. There's too many people that hate the org already because the owner's an asshole. I don't see it. Yeah, doesn't
even
make any sense to me. Good luck, TSM.
even my saying was wrong. TSM is not the new CLG. They're actually worse. Like
Worse.
they're actually worse, and that's just hilarious to think about.
It's crazy that CLG is going to outlast TSM.
That
That
is
is wild.
dude, especially after like that 3-15, not even a year and a half ago, where it's like they were actually sprinting it in LCS. Then we flip flop over to TSM, sprinting it in 2022, and we are where we are right now.
Absolutely wild. Anyways, good luck TSM. That's all I gotta say. And I don't think the LCS is really gonna miss them honestly because they stopped doing content. They stopped trying to win. TSM Legends comes out like once a month now. Also, it used to get like 500K viewers. I looked at the most recent one. It's like 15 now. Yeah. Rip TSM.
Yep, they're dead. I mean, we'll have to do it. We'll have to redo their obituary again, I guess. They
Yeah,
died.
that's a whole man. We'll have to do a whole what is it? A sermon? I don't know what I
No.
don't know terminology here. We'll have to do something for TSM once it's official. Technically, nothing's official yet, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, let's talk finals weekend. FlyQuest Golden Guardians, the first game, and then C9 in the finals. Let's do a little preview. JNT 250.
Yeah, I realize I just kind of screwed up here because I have FlyQuest's logo on top of the Golden Guardians logo, so it's kind of trolling
Oh,
me.
whatever.
But I mean, it feels like if we ignore the last week of games that just happened, meaning like if these two teams played each other before last weekend, I think all of us were probably in agreement that FlyQuest was going to win. However, based on what we saw last weekend with FlyQuest really, really struggling and Golden Guardians looking really, really good, I think the series in actuality is a lot closer than we all might have thought 1 week ago.
I don't know what to think about the LCS anymore. I know I've heard the LCS analysts say this so many times this split, so I'm sorry if people are hearing me say the same thing again. This is the most difficult split ever to predict. Like, what is going on? Golden Guardians look so good 1 week, or they went on a 7 game win streak, then they fell off a cliff, and then like we all think that they're just gonna die and get clapped by EG. They show up, Licorice is pogging. Like, I don't know what to think about that team anymore. FlyQuest starts off the split. We're thinking, hey, this team's like undefeated. And there's the discussion about whether they're going to go undefeated the whole split. They fall off a cliff. They don't look like themselves anymore. How do you predict LCS anymore, man? I have no idea.
Every team CLG now except for Cloud9.
Yes. Oh, actually,
Yeah.
I don't know what to think. Vikla looked so pog last week. Then this week that just happened, he looked terrible. I can't predict anymore. So I'm just gonna say 3-2, and I don't know. Flip a coin.
So what's up? Who are you picking?
I don't know. Let me get a coin.
Okay. I mean
Okay,
that's
no.
that's
Let
fair.
me.
I
I don't
can
know who
flip.
are you picking. Let me
I'll
think
flip
about
one
this
for
because
you
I
if
don't
you
know.
want. I have a coin, so
I don't know who to pick. Like, I guess give me some time to think about it. But
no, heads or tails. Heads
realistically,
or tails right now. Come on.
tails
Okay.
always.
You say tails? Tails is the call. Tails is the call.
Okay, tails is the call, ladies and gentlemen.
It was tails.
We didn't assign a team.
Wait, you didn't I said who are you picking? You're dumb as shit.
I said tails. I thought you were gonna tell me
Oh, you're
who
fucking
tails
dumb.
was.
Okay. Tails is Golden Guardians. Heads is FlyQuest. Who are you picking? In the call midair.
Tails.
It was heads this time.
So I got FlyQuest 3-2.
Yep.
That is so funny, by the way. All right, I got FlyQuest 3-2.
I mean, I'm gonna go with FlyQuest as well. I'm gonna go 3-1. And maybe I'm just coping like I was coping with EG, but I feel like FlyQuest can't put up that big of a stinker again versus Golden Guardians. I mean, I feel like the
If
top
we
lane
put
matchup, the
if we
top
put
lane.
joking aside, sorry, I'm interrupting you. My bad.
Nah, you might as well just go.
If we're putting joking aside, right, and rather than flipping a coin, you got to look at like who is actually likely to show up. And honestly, more recently, it's Golden Guardians. Like, I actually think that they might be favored in this series with how bad FlyQuest look. Now, I realize that that could change in 2 seconds. I understand that, but based off what we saw this past weekend, how can I go against that when Golden Guardians looked so much better and FlyQuest looked so bad? How can I just be like FlyQuest is going to win?
I mean,
There's no explanation.
if you
I don't
want me
know.
to attempt to, I mean, I'm picking FlyQuest 3-1, like I said, and if I had to go for some form of reasoning, if it matters or not, who knows? But I think the top side for FlyQuest is way better than the top side for Golden Guardians. The top side being top jungle in Impact and Spica versus Licorice and River. Now, obviously, in terms of recent performance, I would say that Golden Guardians has been performing FlyQuest with comparing those two roles, but I mean, over the course of the whole split, the top side of FlyQuest is infinitely better than the top side of Golden Guardians.
That is true. Okay. Like that's something that is absolutely true. Over the course of the split, Impact, even though he didn't have the greatest weekend against Fudge, he has looked better than every other top laner in the league on a consistent basis. So that is fair. And Licorice probably was the worst top laner over the course of the regular season. So I guess I could give you some points there. When it comes to Spica, I don't even think Spica looked that bad this weekend. I think that out of all of the really bad performances, I think Spica probably looked the most forgiving, even though it's really difficult to do that when everyone's running it down around you. Um, and then I guess Golden Guardians, like, I think their bot lane actually looked good. I'm just so hesitant to say it because you know how bad their bot lane looked prior.
Yeah, I mean, once again, if we want to talk about, the whole season overall, when in the time that we've seen Prince and Ayla, they have definitely been weaker, much weaker than the beginning of the split. And Stixay and Huhi, while I was critical of them over towards the end of the regular season, they, for the most part, have been a very good bot lane. So, I would say that if we see the Ayla that we've been seeing, Golden Guardians probably actually has the advantage in bot lane.
Yeah, which is wild because Prince was, and honestly, in my opinion, should be the MVP for the regular split. Not so much in playoffs, though. And it is wild that we're actually giving the edge to the Golden Guardians bot lane. And then you can't also forget that Gory was first All Pro, right? Like he actually had a really good season. Vikla was very hit or miss. So there's a few areas that you could give the advantage to Golden Guardians. Yeah. Okay. The coin flip aside and the joking, I actually think I'm going to predict Golden Guardians, which is wild.
So you have Golden Guardians 3-2. I got FlyQuest 3-1.
Yeah.
You got
Wild.
it's just
Unbelievable. And then finals.
I think that's I'm trying to think. I think that's the first series that we've had opposite picks for. I think every series before we've had the same pick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Anyways,
interesting.
predicting the LCS, right? Which is a good thing, actually. Like, it's not a bad thing that we don't know what's going to happen. Although in the finals, we might know what's going to happen. But maybe we could like predict Cloud9 so heavily that we can, sort of jinx it. I know you don't want to do that because you're a Cloud9 fan, but maybe, just maybe, if we predict C9's never got a possibility to lose this series, just maybe someone can upset them.
Well, I mean, if to make some form of prediction, because in my world, I would have FlyQuest running it back against Cloud9 in the finals. I will go with the 3-1. I had the 3-0 in the previous series, but I think just because it's finals, something is going to happen, and it'll end up being 4 games.
Dude, this is how JNT is coping so hard. He's trying to anti-jinx it. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to avoid saying 3-0. He
Oh
said
no.
3-0 C9 for every series so far. Did you for every series so far?
I
I
think
think you
so.
did, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going Cloud9 3-0. I think no matter who they play, they'll have the advantage in every single lane. And honestly, I don't even think the series is going to be close. I wish I could. Like, guys, trust me. I want to hype up the series. I want to be like 5-game banger. And I hope to God it is. But I think I'm giving Cloud9 like the 80-20 to win this series, honestly. Like, I think it is that favored for Cloud9. I'm giving them the 3-0. I don't see where they get outplayed. Maybe Gory outplays MNS, but I think
No,
he's got a
no,
lot of heavy lifting to do, man.
no victor for MNS in the series. Not allowed. Not against Gory.
Not allowed. And the thing is, you're really asking a lot out of the Golden Guardians bot lane if it's them or the FlyQuest bot lane because of how like we said, C9's bot lane looks the best right now. It's not close. They look hands down the best and they play around it so well. That's why we keep seeing Blabber on Maokai. It's because they know they're going to get prio bot lane and you could just set up any dive whenever you want to.
Yeah, it does feel that. I mean, I remember talking about last week the sort of the heavy Maokai priority that Cloud9 was going for, and it does. After we saw this weekend's matches, it makes a lot more sense why they are doing it because while it's not necessarily a strong pick in and of itself, the way that it's allowed to enable the rest of Cloud9 to just have permanent shoving lanes in, gets free objective control around, Drake or Rift Herald, and even Cloud9 can potentially sacrifice objective control to keep further pursuing and pushing their leads in their lanes and just allowed to show up late to objectives just because they have a champion like Maokai who can so easily take control of an area.
Yeah. Anything else on the series, JNT, or should we move on to quick news and close out the show?
I don't know. Hopefully finals weekend's cool. Wish I was
Yeah,
going, but
please 3-2. I would. I mean, I don't know how it's gonna happen, but find a way. Find a
I
way, guys. Find a
I
way.
I am fearful that we are gonna get 2-3-0s potentially in both series.
That would make these playoffs one of the least interesting after all the 3-0s that we've seen.
It's like the opposite from the last playoffs, which the majority of the series were like 3-2 in summer 2020. It was
Yeah.
like a record number of 5-game series and playoffs, and then I think finals ended up still just being 3-0. But maybe the
Yeah.
reverse will happen. Shit ton of 3-0s and make it to 3-2 in finals. So
The only close series so far this playoffs was 100 and GG, right?
yeah, and maybe like if you want to say C9 versus CLG, even though it was a 3-1, but
Yeah.
I mean those two are the only close ones, and every other one has pretty much been a stomp.
Yeah. Okay, let's do quick news. What do we got?
Yeah, a little bit of quick news. One, speaking of Cloud9, they won coaching staff of the split. Feels kind of stupid. I don't know, but at the same
Dude, the whole
time,
award feels kind of stupid though, right? Like
well,
they
one
won the
one
split,
thing that
so
I don't
sure.
think we even maybe you were thinking about it. I certainly didn't think about it, but the switch from mid lane from Diplex to MNS, and that probably was a big factor for the majority of voters. So that was one thing that I didn't even consider, but I think for the move like that, you definitely have to credit the coaching staff for that, 100%.
Yeah, and they won the split, right? They finished first. So, I mean, I'm not going to disagree. Like, I don't know. This is all I honestly I can't believe we're still doing this award actually because everyone that votes for it is all like, yeah, we don't really know. We're just kind of guessing. I can't believe that we still do this award, but there it is. The next award that's going to be announced will be the MVP that'll be announced this week. Do we want to do predictions?
Well, you kind of already did. So, well, at least you said that you think it should be Prince. If you had the pick, you would say it's Prince, but
Absolutely.
who do
Yes.
you think it's going to be?
Oh,
If
they're
you
going
had
to
to
go with
guess.
Berserker.
I think that they'll probably go with Berserker as well. However, if it was up to me, I think I'd go with Fudge. And a lot of that just has to do with the way that Cloud9 played the game throughout the entirety of 2023 so far. And more often than not, it's been through Fudge in the top lane. And, it's not like Blabber has been, spam ganking him and then Fudge is taking over the game because he's getting a lead due to Blabber. It's Fudge is the one getting the lane purely through his own volition. And then Blabber just gets to do whatever he wants and goes out and helps all the other lanes. So Fudge is basically like a one-man wrecking ball up in the top lane right now. I don't think there's a single lane where he is lost, basically. The only one that he did was the first matchup against Impact when they played FlyQuest. And other than that, he's destroyed everybody.
So while I don't agree, because I think I would have Fudge like, I don't know, maybe third or fourth on my list of MVP votes, I like the argument that you put for him. Whereas a lot of it is done by himself with how much focus is on the bot lane this whole split long. I like the argument for it, anyways. But I think the reason why it's easy to predict Berserker is because the whole split long, it's been like, it was Prince, it was Prince, it was Prince, and then the last like week, everyone was like, "Oh my god, that Draven game! Let's switch over to Berserker." And well, we saw the All Pro voting where Berserker got number 180 carry, so that's why it's pretty obvious to me that they're gonna go with Berserker. But I don't know. I disagree with it, but I'm not upset. Berserker had an amazing split. He's probably one of the best players we have in the league. I'm not upset with it whatsoever. So yeah, good for him.
I think you could give it to Blabber, Fudge, or Berserker, and I personally wouldn't have a problem with it.
I see. And last on the quick news, Latigris changing her name. She is now going to be known as Gabby. Well, Gabby Durden.
Yeah,
But
that's a
Gabby.
yeah, that's a real name, but Pythagoras is no more.
Yeah. I don't really have much to add on that, honestly. She's got a new name.
Dude, and
You know
sometimes
what?
sometimes name changes end up being pretty good. There was Incarnation to Jensen, there was Zion Spartan to Darshan, there was who else was there? Who else name changed?
Uh, I feel like there should be someone that comes off like to my mind.
There
Oh, Wiggly to Griffin.
Yeah, there's one. That
Yeah.
that guy who's playing what's his new name? Formerly
Armeo?
no, I was gonna say oh yeah, true, that guy as well. Armeo. No,
There's been a few name
I was
changes.
thinking of TL's current Challenger League jungler, was the former Hama Life jungler Willer, but I don't even know what the hell his new name is. Cubby said what it was on our first episode, but
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
don't know. Here's what I'll say. Even though I don't have much to say about the name change, what I will say is last week we had a topic about Latigris that I guess was controversial. I don't know. But one thing she did do is she tweeted out like taking full responsibility for her cast. We said that she needs to improve her casting. And I think huge credit to someone being able to acknowledge, you know what, guys? It was a bad cast, and I'm going to work to get better. Big shout out to La Tigress for that because she puts up with a lot of hate for, well, not good reasons, honestly. I think she just gets hate from people, whereas clearly she's doing her best, even if she's not that great of a caster. So big shout out to La Tigress, still trying to get better, and I could give her a pog for that.
Yeah, and then she played into the memes a little bit as well, tweeting out like the line that she had where like Luger had the blood running through his veins, and that
That
was
tweet
funny.
was funny.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that
I
was
didn't understand it until you pointed it out to me. I was like, yeah, I saw that, but like I didn't get it at all. But
yeah.
it makes sense and it's actually pretty funny now.
All she can do from the situation that she's in is acknowledge that it didn't go well and try to get better, and that's what she's doing. And she's memeing on it too. So shout out to her. Hope that that gets better, and hope the cast this weekend are good. Hope you guys all enjoy finals. Finals week should be weekend, I guess, should be a lot of fun. And just a reminder that we will be live after finals. I'll tweet out whenever we're going live because we don't know when that's going to be.
I mean, it's for three
Um,
zero. We'll probably hit the 7 o'clock. So
yeah, maybe.
hmm.
Enjoy the finals, guys, and hopefully we'll see you here on twitch.tv/Clown Fiesta Podcast. Remember to subscribe, remember to like, remember to all that stuff, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us for episode 120 of the Clown Fiesta Podcast. Take care.